I'll start with introducing our guest speaker tonight, Judge Rachel Ruchie Freier. And it would be impossible for me to provide a complete bio of her remarkable life and career in just a couple of minutes, but I'll try to hit some highlights. She was born in Borough Park, went to Beis Yaakov High School, got married when she was 19, and began working in a variety of jobs. And at age 30, decided to come back to college. And we were very fortunate to have her at Touro College as an undergraduate. And then went to Brooklyn Law School, practiced as an attorney. And in 2016, was elected as a judge in Brooklyn. And she'll tell you a little bit about the various roles she's served as a judge. But somewhere in the middle of that amazing story and 6 children, she's also found the time to start a number of not-for-profits to help the Jewish community in Brooklyn, including ones that help combat poverty, help fill gaps in education, and her most recent non-for-profit that we'd like to hear more about, called Ezras Nashim, which is a female all-volunteer ambulance corps that helps serve the Brooklyn community. So welcome, Judge Freier.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You know, Touro College has such a special place in my heart, so it's a privilege to be here, and I look forward to spending some time and hearing from you and hearing from the students and faculty, and just take it away.
So it's our 50th anniversary this year, and it's an absolute pleasure to have one of our most illustrious graduates join us. One thing I left out from her bio was the New York Times characterization of Judge Freier, which was as a Hasidic Superwoman. So we're prepared to hear some amazing things tonight. Why don't we start with you're telling us, I provided sort of the outlines of your education, but why don't we start with you're telling us how you became interested in law and how you kind of decided that relatively later in life than most students that you'd begin a career in the law.
So that's a fantastic question, because I think law is part of my DNA. As a little kid, I was always the family advocate. I was the oldest of my siblings. And if somebody didn't get paid enough money as a day camp counselor, or my mother got paid a check that bounced, I was advocating for everybody. And when I was in high school, the school offered a course called legal stenography, which was on a commercial track, preparing the girls to go on and become secretaries for lawyers. Now, back then in the 70s and early 80s, we really didn't have opportunities for higher education at that point for the Hasidic community. And for me, the idea of being a legal secretary was going to be the profession, the career that was going to make me happy and fulfill all the desires that I have for success. And I graduated high school at the age of 17, and I did get great jobs working in law firms, and everything was wonderful. I married a young man who was going to sit in Kollel. I was making a fantastic amount of money then for an 18-year-old girl, and I was able to support him while he was in Kollel. And then as I was doing more and more work and I was advancing to the level of a paralegal, I started to take a step back and say, well, look at these lawyers. Some of them are coming in now, they're younger than I am. And why can't I do what they're doing? But all the years that I was growing up, I was taught that if you go on to higher education or become a professional, get a degree, then you're going to compromise your religious values, your Hasidic values. And it was mutually exclusive. And that's when I started to think to myself, why? Why is it that way? Why can't I have the best of both worlds? So it was this little tiny voice within me that was growing louder and louder and louder. And by the time I turned 30, my husband had graduated Touro. I thought that if he went to college, he would vicariously live my dream for me. So I put him through college, and it was a wonderful experience for him. And sitting at his graduation at Touro College, that little sound inside me was screaming, Ruchie, now it's your turn, now it's your turn. And that was the beginning. Touro opened up a whole new world for me.
So let me ask you a couple of questions to follow up on that amazing story. First of all, For you, how would you define Hasidic values? You talked about compromising, not wanting to compromise your Hasidic values. So
Right.
tell us what you mean by that. I mean, obviously, we all know a little bit about Hasidus, but when you talk about Hasidic values, tell us what that means.
So it means that you, as a Hasidic mother, now as a grandmother, your family is very important. And the way you run your home is very important. Where you have your Yom Tovim is very important. It's my Shabbos Suda is very important. It's going to be homemade challah. Everything's going to be homemade. It's a lot of family time. And that's not to say that other groups of Jewish people that are religious don't necessarily have that, but Hasidism is just also with a lot of restrictions in place with that. So especially for women and the separation of the genders between men and women, I follow all those rules and I conform to all those rules. And sometimes when you venture out into the world, you sometimes feel like, well, I have to blend in. I want to blend in. And then when you want to blend in, you slowly start to change your dress or your appearance. And I always stood out and I did so proudly. And everyone knew that I was dressed the way I was because I was from the Hasidic community of Borough Park, whether it's the long dresses, the long skirts, it's always wearing the tights. And then when I started my work, I didn't want to shake hands with men, knowing that there are rabbis who say that it's permitted socially for men and women to shake hands, and many people who are Orthodox do. But I said, I have to establish my boundaries. And the way I am up until now is the way I want to remain all the way through my years of education and what goes on beyond that. So it's a combination of strong family values, raising your children and spending time with them. And of course, it means having a large family. And it means just being there for them, being involved with your parents, with your grandparents. And then also being there for my husband, allowing him to always be in the shul, in the synagogue, all the celebrations that the men go to. It's like, it wasn't like I was going to say, okay, see, David, I have to study, so you don't go to Tish tonight. It was all those things that were important to us as a Hasidic family should remain intact.
Before we talk about some more things about how your career progressed, I just want to follow up on something you just said. You intentionally felt that you wanted to be different in the workplace, and even perhaps went, let's just say in some cases, with Nimishras Hadin, beyond the letter of the law to make that point. So how did you find people reacted to it? Did people react positively? Did you ever get negative feedback? Tell us a little bit about that.
So what I've learned actually is that whatever my teachers in Beis Yaakov taught me is absolutely true. If I would put them, I did put them to the test, because you know what they say, you could take a girl out of Beis Yaakov, but you can't take Beis Yaakov out of a girl. So I'll give you an example. And I found, and I always share this when I speak to young students, that when you show people that you're committed to your values, like whatever connects you to God, whatever connects you to Hashem, and keeps you spiritually connected, don't let go for 1 second, because you don't have to let go to be successful, whether it's in the academic world, the corporate world, the legal, or the medical world, wherever you are. So because the message you're giving is that you're a person of honesty, integrity, loyalty, and commitment. Even when no one is looking, I'm going to only eat my kosher food when we all go out to eat for a judicial celebration. When no one is looking, I'm going to leave home Friday in time to be home to light the Shabbos candles. And when you're consistent and respectful of other people, and you explain what you do, that to me is the key. Explain, prepare, share. I'll come in on Friday with some challah. I'll come in on Friday with I'll say, here are some Shabbos pastries. You're going to be covering me when I leave work early. I want to show you my thanks. I'm sharing my Shabbos with you. But I'll give you a different example, a very clear example. So when I was a legal secretary, I worked at a large corporate law firm on Lexington Avenue, Manhattan, and it was the summertime. And I find out that Fridays in the summer, they have dress down Friday. As Dr. Kadish, I never knew what dress down Friday was. And they explained to me that they want to make the staff feel that they're not working so hard on Fridays. So you can come in and you can dress down. No ties, no suits. I mean, there were some rules. You couldn't come in with shorts and flip-flops, but you could just be very casual. Now, I come from Borough Park. And in Borough Park, we like to dress up, not down. So every Friday, I had this dilemma. What am I going to wear today? Now, back then I had a denim dress and it had what we call in Borough Park borderline sleeves. You know, Dr. Kadish, they invented something which revolutionized the way Jewish women dress. It's called a shell. I wear them every day, different different styles, different colors, different fabric, and you put it on, and whatever dress you wear, you're good to go. You conform to all the rules of tzniut, of modesty. But back then they didn't have it, so my sleeves were borderline. But what that meant is, if I raised my arm, it rolled down. But I said, "Hey, Ruchie, you're going to work at Wilkie Farr on Lexington Avenue. Who cares about your sleeves?" Or so I thought. And I'm sitting at my desk and I'm typing. And one of the attorneys that I was assigned to work for, a Harvard graduate, I'm Jewish but not religious, comes to my desk and says to me, "Rachel, I see your forearms." Dr. Kadish, none of my tznius teachers in Beis Yaakov ever impacted me like that young attorney. Because the message was, I know you're Hasidic. I know you dress modestly. And I'm sure you don't know your sleeves are too short. Well, I went home that day, I threw out that dress. Literally, I have to wear my religion on my sleeve. When you stand up for what your values are, people respect it. So I've learned that the vast majority have always been respectful and I encourage them to ask questions, because if they don't ask questions, they're going to make assumptions. And most of the time, those assumptions are wrong. So clear the air, build bridges, create bonds, and you'll be Makadeh Shem Shemayim and be able to achieve success.
That's very well put. Let me turn back to a little bit about your education, and you did talk a little bit about the values that you were taught at Beis Yaakov, and said that you had a great time at Touro. So tell us a little bit about your time at Touro. Who influenced you, and how did you find that it helped advance your career?
So Touro was for me the transition. You had to take a Beis Yaakov high school graduate who went to seminary, who followed all the rules, and was really very frightened about stepping out into the outside world. Today it's very different, because today it's been so accepted already. And thank God there's been so many successful years of Touro graduates. But back then it wasn't that way. And for me, it was the ability to come into a academic college environment. And Dean Goldschmidt was incredible. From the very first student orientation that I went to, I felt that he was there for me. If I ever had a question, I went to his office, I felt like I was the only student that he was concerned about. He gave guidance, he helped, whether it was financial aid, they were there to help me. I found that if I needed help with, like, well, the semester load is too heavy, can I make it a little bit lighter? And there was always someone that I can speak to that was able to help me. I had amazing professors. Initially, when I started, I'll share a little secret with you. I was afraid to tell anybody I want to go to law school. It was like a far-fetched dream. So I said, I'm going to major in business, because if I never get to law school, it's good to have a degree in business. So I sat in class, and in the first economics class I sat, and I said, this is not for me. And I switched to poli-sci, and I had wonderful professors there, Professor Bertram, Professor Munt. They allowed me to really see that political science was my passion, and that was pre-law and then law school. And then I had Professor Bash in my first semester. We did speech with her. She made class interesting and fun. I said, hey, I can do this. I can get through college. And then towards the end of my years in college, I had Dr. Popkin. I took a class in Manhattan. I had it for humanities, and that was a complete different perspective. And he challenged me, and I challenged him back. So it was a fantastic experience. Then by the time I graduated Touro, I was ready for law school.
How did you find law school? Was it challenging, particularly balancing all the things you talked about?
Yeah, law school was, don't forget, I did it probably at the most difficult time in a woman's life. I started college smack in the middle of my childbearing years. I started college with my 3 sons. My first girl was born in my first semester. And then when I graduated that year, my twin girls were born. So I started with 3, I graduated with 6. And then by the time I started law school, my twins were like almost toddlers. So it was a full house. It was a full, busy house. And I was determined. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to maintain the same average I had in Touro, but I was going to try my best. I really was going to. When I did it part-time in 4 years, it sometimes it was brutal, but for me, the fact that I made it to law school, the fact that I was sitting there and learning about trials and learning about civil procedure and learning about criminal procedure, I felt so lucky that I had Touro that enabled me to be sitting in class. I said, even if I never become a lawyer, because there were naysayers every step of the way of my journey, Dr. Kadish. I had naysayers predicting that it was never going to happen. Never going to happen. I wasn't going to get into law school. I wasn't going to get to the LSAT. And if I did, I wouldn't pass the bar. And if I did, I wouldn't have any clients. So for me, every step that I was able to do, I always go back to Touro because that's where it started.
That's great. Well, we have actually, you're part of a great tradition of not believing in naysayers. Because 50 years ago, when Dr. Lander started Touro, there were plenty of naysayers. And 125,000 graduates later, I think we've probably proved them wrong. So perhaps we taught you a little bit about how to continue to persevere, which was one of Dr. Lander's great strengths.
Yeah.
So do you sleep at all? With all the things you described?
Yes, I do. I sleep between 5 and 6 hours every night, but I catch up on Shabbos.
Sounds very familiar. Let me ask you a little bit about your work as a judge. So tell us first a little bit about what courts you've been in and what working as a judge is like.
Okay, so just for a disclaimer, I can't discuss any cases, no cases at all, because it may, give rise to how I may decide on a case, and I can't discuss politics, but I can share my experience. So I was elected as a civil court judge in 2016, and my first term was going to start January 2017, and I found out about 2 weeks before the term started that I was going to be assigned to criminal court. And that was like a shock. It's like, criminal court? This must be a mistake. What do I know about crime? I grew up in a Hasidic neighborhood. I never watched TV, didn't go to the movies. What do I know about crime? So that was a real eye-opener. It was incredible. Those 2 years, after the first year, I said, I'll stay another year here because I really liked it. It was just incredible. It was incredible also how much of the values that I learned in Beis Yaakov, the Jewish values, are really what helps me on the bench. Learning everything that we learned in Pirkei Avos about judging everybody favorably, not being quick to pass judgment. All these concepts are really what gives you a foundation, because you're sitting on the bench and you're deciding sometimes people's future. And I always like to say that I love my job because I have the best seat in the house. Because here in New York, regardless of which courtroom I'm assigned to, when I get on the bench, above me are the words, "In God we trust." And that always puts me into perspective. So being a judge, a lot of people don't really know, but you really are an employee of the Office of Court Administration to a large extent, and you're given assignments. So I was assigned to criminal court, then I was assigned to Brooklyn Civil Court, then I was assigned to Queens Civil Court, and now I'm back in Brooklyn Civil Court. And that is a pretty newer policy of the court system. It's not that judges get one part and that's where they are. They want judges to get a well-rounded experience. And in hindsight, I could say it's really a fantastic opportunity. It's always challenging when you're thrust into a new part and you have to learn new areas of the law, but it was an amazing experience. And there's the trial part, then there's the other parts, there's a small claims part, then you have the landlord-tenant parts, you have the housing part, you have the commercial part. So it's really very fascinating. And I'm in civil court, which they call the people's court. So there's a real wide variety of cases.
How do you, without talking about, you alluded to briefly that the principles you learned in terms of justice uh, as part of the Jewish tradition have influenced the way you approach being on the bench. Without talking, obviously, with no names and no specific cases, would you say that's an approach that most judges use, or do many of them have a different approach? Or how would you distinguish the way you approach a case from the way other judges do?
I really can't answer about how other judges decide their cases. And that I really wouldn't be able to, because a lot of it, it's like what they're thinking and their thinking processes. I can only really speak for myself.
Okay.
That I could say. And we have a lot of constraints, right? We have a lot of times there's like a heavy caseload, and there could be limited time. And sometimes you are like, you have to decide from all these pressures, how are you going to get through it and make your decision? So for me, having that emunah, having that faith that Hashem runs the world, God runs the world, and if He put me here, I'm supposed to be here. If I'm supposed to be here, I can get through it. And that's what helps me get through my days. So I would assume everybody has their own judgment, their own thinking, and we're all different. And they want diversity on the bench. They want everybody to bring their values with them. So I think we spent so many years growing up in Beis Yaakov and learning so much about character traits and about judging others and how you have to, and you know, it's just, I don't even, it's part of my psyche. We don't even realize how much what we learn as children remains with us when we're adults.
When are you up for re-election?
It's a 10-year term.
Okay. So,
and I'm in my sixth year. I just started my sixth year.
Have you thought about plans for the future?
Always, always. But I've learned to leave it in Hashem's hands, because there's so many different ways that things can play itself out. And sometimes you think you know where you're going, and then you really don't know where you're going. But I would love to have opportunities to rise up and to do more. I love law. I think it's an incredible area. I think because it overlaps into everything in life. And that's why I got involved in Ezras Nashim. I came in really as a legal advocate. So and I never thought I had a medical component to my brain. I was just about law, justice, and advocacy. But it's so wide and so deep. It has just so many different nuances, and you could go to law school and you don't even know where you'll end up getting the job, because there's so many opportunities in law.
So let's talk a little bit about that. I mentioned that you'd been working with a number of not-for-profits, some of which you started. But let's tell us a little bit about the history of Ezras Nashim. You alluded to briefly how you became involved. And then let's talk a little bit about how it functions. And then I'll ask you a couple of other questions after that.
Sure. So I think I have to just rewind a little bit and share with you like my personal story of how I got involved in doing this. Like, why did I get involved in this, like, askanos, this public advocacy here? So when I graduated Touro, and I realized it was a major milestone in my life, and I was going to go to law school, I was really very worried. So, okay, now I'm going to be entering a very liberal academic environment. It's going to be a setting that's a co-ed setting, no more just women's division, women's campus. It's going to be a co-ed. And I've been working in law firms and for the corporate world for many years at that point already, but I have never been in an academic environment, in a very liberal one. And of course, I had all these naysayers who made these predictions. So I made my deal with Hashem. I said, dear God, please help me get through law school without compromising my values. And then when your children come to me for help within the law, I will help them. And God wasted no time in testing me. And that's how I got involved in 2008, and I formed B'derech to help at-risk Hasidic youth, help them move on, get GEDs. And then that eventually was taken over by other people in the community. They opened up other programs. So I was very happy to step back a little bit. And then I got involved with helping women who were EMTs for many years, who wanted to get involved in volunteering and serving the community. And as you know, we've been served for about 50 years by a very prominent and very, very amazing all-male EMS agency. But what I had never known at that point was that women had wanted to serve. I thought this is what men do, and it's the man's job. And we have great EMTs in Borough Park. It never occurred to me that women wanted to join for decades, and they were being foreclosed these opportunities. And that when Hatzalah had originally started, there was supposed to be a women's division. So anyhow, one night I get this phone call from an EMT, a young woman. She says to me, "We're having a meeting tonight, and we need a lawyer to help us." And we were told that we need a woman lawyer who would do this pro bono for free. And we were given your name. Could you come to our meeting tonight? And I'm thinking to myself, who are these women? Are they a bunch of rabble rousers? Because if they are, I'm out of here. But I had my deal with God, so I had to go to the meeting at least to see who it was. I went to this very humble home in Borough Park, and I met these Hasidic women who were more to the right than I am, even more conservative than I am. And I heard their story, and I said, if I went to law school just for this cause alone, it was worth it. So I thought it was going to be my mitzvah of the month. I'm going to come. I'm going to advocate for them. It's the 21st century. For sure, they're going to be accepted. And then I'll go on to my next mitzvah.
So, but before you continue the story, let me just ask you, when you met these women who were so passionate about trying to work as EMTs and help, what was it that did they feel that there was a gap in the existing services, or was it simply that they sort of felt a passion to serve Klal Yisrael and to help people?
No, it was all about women's dignity and modesty, primarily and especially in emergency labor.
Okay.
So many of these women were labor coaches and doulas, and they felt that when a woman is giving birth and it's an emergency, she's so vulnerable and her dignity is totally exposed. I mean, and she should have the choice of having a woman provide her with emergency care. Now, when they had approached me, this was about 2011, at that time, the Rebbe in New Square in Rockland County had recently integrated women into the Hatzalah of New Square. So these women who were trying for all these years and were like a splintered group said, hey, let's get together. Let's get all the people who took the course to become EMTs over the years, because if the Square Rebbe is doing it, for sure they'll follow suit in Borough Park. So I came and I met with them. And we even met the Square Rebbe to see how it's being done in New Square. But what I realized was there was no connection to what was going on in New Square to what was happening in Borough Park. So by default, I had to become the director. And then I said, it'll be malpractice if I don't become an EMT. So I took my mother, who's my best friend, and I said, Ma, we're taking the EMT course together. And we sat in class together. And sitting in class said, this is amazing. I never thought I had a medical component to my brain, but I love it. There's nothing, what could be boring, Dr. Kadish? The heart, the lungs, the brain, maybe the kidneys are boring. It's not boring. And I said, I have to go on to paramedic school. That was a much harder class, but that's in a nutshell. And I was not prepared for the opposition, but the opposition made a very big mistake because they went on social media calling me a radical Hasidic woman. And this was part of my radical feminist agenda. And it was not about feminism. It was about tznius, about women's modesty. And I said, this is about Rachel Freier and her women's rights movement. And I said, I'm doing this for tznius, for women. It's not about women's rights. It happens to be that most of the time women are right, especially when it comes to our medical care. But then they told me, when it comes to speed and strength, men are superior. So women can't do this. And that was a big mistake. Because if you tell me that I can't do something because I'm an observant Hasidic woman, I'm going to show you that we can do it, maybe even better than you. And that's how Esses Hashem got started. And it's a story of about 10 and a half years. It became a volunteer ambulance service last year after 10 years of advocacy, lawyers, court cases, appealing it, going to the state to Albany to fight it. But we prevailed. And it was clearly from Hashem. this is how it had to happen. I mean, the hashgacha pratis, the divine providence that we had every step of the way. I had the help from the fire department of the city of New York, the health department of the state of New York, the EMS councils. Everybody said, we're so proud of you women, because you women should have done this years ago. And I think it changed me as a mother. And the women who joined, they say, Ruchie, we never even understood what it means to come and help a woman at these vulnerable times. And you know what? We thought we're coming for the young women. Even the senior population, when they fall in the shower, they don't really care if the man wants to come and help them. They just know one thing. I just fell out of the shower. I want a woman to help me.
So you're absolutely right. There's an amazing satisfaction and ability to help other people that one gets in healthcare. In the past 2 years, I've done more medicine than I did in the decade before then, because unfortunately, in the midst of the COVID epidemic, I've gotten more and more calls. And to be honest, I've really realized how much I've missed it, being able to take care of people. And just this week, I've had a couple of patients who've called me with complicated cases. And you're absolutely right. There's something absolutely beautiful about being able to help other people through complicated and difficult times when they're vulnerable and they really need the help of someone who's understanding. So I'm extraordinarily sympathetic to the ideas you've talked about. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you, so why do you think there was this opposition? I mean, it seems to make so much sense.
Again, it's a question of trying to answer and put myself into someone else's, brain of why a group of men from the religious Jewish community were opposing a group of women who said, we want our modesty preserved when we're having an emergency. And for many years, I tried to come up with answers. Maybe it's power, maybe it's ego, maybe it's competition. And then I realized, Dr. Kadish, this is because this is how Hashem wanted it to happen. Because this is what God wanted. We're a complete separate entity. We have our own license. And this is such a hard license to get. Sure. The state doesn't give out these licenses anymore. If somebody wants to now go into the business and have an ambulance service, they don't give them out anymore. You have to buy another business. They go for like $1 million. So if you want to prove that there's a specific need that can be filled with the existing EMS that's in existence, you have to go and make a special application. And we did it. And then our own from counterparts opposed us. And it was ironic. We had Italian women that were sitting there at the hearing with, really religious Catholics. And they were saying, these women deserve to have their modesty. There's a need to preserve. And the men would say they don't. Now, how can a man say what a woman feels?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, so
because I would never dare to. How large is Ezras Nashim now? How many women participate? How many ambulances are there? And how many calls do you get?
Okay, so the interesting thing is that I had to limit myself to the Borough Park branch because we get so many calls. Help me start something in Toronto. Help me start something in the 5 counts. Help bring this to Rockland County. And I realized that I couldn't do that because I had to take it. I had to create the prototype and I had to excel and I had to learn so much. Aside from protocols and patient care, I had to learn about creating shifts. I had to learn about dealing with the fire department. I had to deal with this so much that we had to learn. How to create a dispatching system, how to work out mutual aid. So right now, I would say we have about 50 members. Mm-hmm. We have many supporters, and we have people that are interested, but we're sticking to BARPA because we need to create it and be strong, really strong, before we're going to let but I help other people who want to do something similar in other neighborhoods. But as Nashim now has a widespread, and wide influence, but we're 50 members strong, and we're sticking to our Borough Park headquarters, our Borough Park base, and we serve the surrounding areas. So we'll go into Flatbush, Bensonhurst, all the areas that are surround Borough Park, we help as well, whether it's Coney Island, go, the side of Ocean Parkway, but our base is Borough Park. And now we're starting also an ambulance division. So that's another whole business. And I say business, but I'm not making any money. I'm sure you understand. This
Sure.
is like, this is not profit. We do have employees like we have to have, but it all goes back to Touro, because Touro gave me the opportunity to get that college degree and move on to law school. And I was able to do so much more than I ever expected.
So you seem to have an amazing ability to compartmentalize what you're doing and focus on one area without letting other things interfere. So what advice would you have to our students and to young people about how to be able to do that more effectively?
Okay. So first of all, I really thank Hashem, and I had Siyata Deshmaya, and I also have a wonderful mother who lives around the corner. So I have to give credit to my mother, to my parents, and to God. And then once I take care of those important factors, I have a couple of tips to give people out there. First of all, believe in yourself. Don't listen to naysayers. Don't let them derail you. Don't let them stop you. Okay, now, if you're a woman and you're running a house like I am, and you want to do things, get help in the house. You need it. It's a must. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity. Get the help that you need so you can be a good mother, a good wife, and you could also be a great student and a professional. The next thing is, if you're going to school like I did while I was in the middle of raising my children, don't rush. Unless there's some compelling reason, some time clock that's ticking that I don't know about, that someone has. But I've seen people try to take things in an accelerated path, and I've seen them trip over their own 2 feet. I did my undergrad in 6 years. I loved every class. I enjoyed every semester. And it was a journey in and of itself. It wasn't just a means to an end. It was an end in and of itself, because I learned how to study. I learned how to appreciate education. And it was, for me, it was a privilege to be in college. So enjoy the experience and make the most of it, because you may find that you have other interests than you thought you had. All right. So the next thing is, you need the support of your family. And if it doesn't come right away, don't give up. Just show them that it's important to you. I'll tell you now that my husband is my biggest supporter. When I ran for public office, people made a big deal that I'm the first Hasidic woman that ran and became, but he is the first Hasidic man who not only supported his wife and encouraged me to run, he financed my whole campaign. I maxed out all of his credit cards. He ran to all the shuls getting signatures for me. And I have to say that when I first started college, I don't know if it was so easy for him. People would stop them. What's your wife doing? Why do you let her? I would tell them, you think I asked him? Like, what kind of question are you asking? So if you want to do something, I always said, I don't want my children to feel like I'm compromising them, or my husband to feel like he's not going to have supper. So I have a 20-minute rule. If it takes 20 minutes to make dinner, it's not on the menu. Make easy meals, make your housework as easy as possible, spread it out, enjoy the process. And if people need to be encouraged to encourage you, give them time. They'll come around. My kids now are my biggest fans. They're amazing. And now I have my grandchildren, my next generation of fans.
That's phenomenal. I want to just tell you a brief story about another Touro graduate who exemplifies some of what you just said. Dr. Friedman, who graduated as the valedictorian of the Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine in Middletown last year, actually has a story that's just amazing as yours, even though that's almost impossible to believe. But she started medical school with 6 children, finished in 4 years with 10 and was valedictorian of her class. But the reason I'm telling you the story is not to talk about her so much, but your point about making sure you have the support of a family. The school there actually has an award for the most supportive spouse, significant other of a student, because medical school is hard, and it recognizes how important the family relationships that you emphasize were.
Mhm.
And so her husband actually won the award for the most supportive
Wow.
spouse of the year. So you're absolutely right. It's important to make sure that you bring your family along. I'm going to turn this over to Sam Levine in just a second, but I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I'm
Thank
thrilled that
you.
you had such a good experience at Touro. And in our next 50 years, we're going to try to continue to make sure that for people who want to get a high quality college education in a friendly environment, that just as Judge Freier had a great experience, we're going to have another couple of 100,000 who have a similar experience.
That's a shame. Yes, you have the next generation of Friars. My girls are in college. One graduated already, so keep up your
We're
great
looking
work.
for the following generation too.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn this over to Sam Levine, who directs the Touro Jewish Law Institute, is professor of law at the Fuchsberg Law Center, and he'll, I'm sure, have some of his own thoughts, but also triage questions from the audience. And Sam, you've got about 15 minutes because we've done a lot of talking. And thanks again for joining us, and thanks for making this happen.
Thank you, Dr. Kadish. And as always, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for your continued leadership of the Touro College and University system. Judge Freier, thank you. It's such a pleasure to have you with us this evening. And in my capacity as director of the Jewish Law Institute at Touro Law, I want to thank you for continuing this tradition we have for about 12 years now. We've had a distinguished lecturer, and you, of course, are this year's distinguished lecturer, following in the path of so many prominent judges, lawyers, rabbis, professors, other communal leaders like yourself. And it's particularly wonderful for us to be able to have such a prominent graduate of Touro alum, one of our most illustrious alums, as Dr. Kadish mentioned. So thank you so much for joining us. In my capacity as the director of the Jewish Law Institute, I also want to thank you for your service on the Jewish Law Institute Advisory Board, along with a number of other prominent judges and lawyers from across the United States. In my capacity as professor of law at Touro, as Dr. Kadish mentioned, I want to thank you for serving as an inspiration for our students. I've been watching the questions as they're coming in from our audience, and a number of the participants, a number of the viewers have mentioned how much of an inspiration you've been for women and for everyone who's trying to follow a similar path. And on that note, Touro Law School does have a number of students who follow what we might consider to be non-traditional, less common paths toward the law school. Not that many Hasidic students, but many students like yourself who may be the first in their family to attend college, certainly to attend law school. Many of our students have family, as you described your own experiences. And I wonder if you have anything more to say to our students, any more advice you have, both for law school itself and toward their career aspirations.
Yeah. So don't think that every step of the way was easy for me. Don't think I passed every exam. Don't think there wasn't failure along my journey. And embrace it. If something goes wrong, doesn't turn out the way you thought it would be, you didn't get the grade you thought you would get, just pick yourself up and learn from the experience. It'll make you stronger, and you'll look back and you'll say, wow, I learned so much from that failure. Because failing is part of the human experience. You look at people and you say, oh, wow, they're so successful. It must have been easy for them. It wasn't easy for me. And I'm so happy to be able to inspire other people, because everyone should feel that they can do it. I always like to quote Pirkei Avos, because it all goes back to Pirkei Avos, right? So it says, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmar. You don't have to finish the task, right? But you're not absolved from at least trying. If you want to do something, don't worry about finishing. Just start it and go for it. And I also like to always share the famous Hasidic story of Reb Zisha. Rabbi Zisha was on his deathbed. He lived in the 1700s from Zisha of Anupol, and he's crying. And his students, his Talmidim, are saying, Rebbe, you're such a tzaddik. You're going to go straight to Gan Eden. Why are you crying? And he says, I'm not crying because they're going to ask me up in heaven, Zisha, why weren't you like Moses, like Moshe Rabbeinu? I'm not crying because they're going to ask me, Zisha, why weren't you like King David, David HaMelech? I'm crying because they're going to ask me, Zisha, why wouldn't you like Zisha could have been? We don't know what we're capable of doing. I had no idea when I started Touro if I would graduate, if I would get to law school. I had no idea. But I said, I have to try. I don't want to be a grandmother years from now and say, oh, Bobby could have done it, but she just didn't. And it was really Touro and Dean Goldschmidt who made me feel at that very beginning, that first semester, I felt like this is a journey I think I can navigate. And I knew it was going to be a 10-year journey. I knew it was going to take me 10 years and I wasn't rushing. And my friends were laughing. I said, Ruchie, it's going to take you 10 years because I shared it with my close friends. We'll be 40 by then. And guess what happened? 10 years later, we all turned 40 and I was a lawyer. So you can do what you can pursue your dreams. And I also find that in Touro, there are so many professors that you could reach out to. I was close with a number of them, and it really helped me. It helped me so much get through. And like I said, Touro was that transition for me. So make the most of your years at Touro is the best advice I can give you.
I think that's great advice. Thank you. And at Touro Law School, we do take pride in being student-centered and allowing students to have access and support among the faculty. So I'd certainly encourage my own students to follow, and I do encourage my own students to follow that advice. How about your thoughts on some of our students who have aspirations toward becoming a judge? We do have a number of alumni who joined the judiciary. And are there any suggestions you have for someone who's thinking about that direction?
Sure. So I was very lucky. My uncle of blessed memory, Alav Hashalom Duvi Schmidt, was a judge for many years, and he was my mentor. When I started college, he was my mentor. And when I got through law school, I would sit and observe him on the bench. And I told him years ago, Duvi, I want to be a judge just like you. And then when he retired, he said to me, Ruchie, I'm retiring now. If you still want to be a judge, you have to run from my original seat. So I became a judge by running an election. But there's other ways to become a judge as well. You could be appointed. So for certain positions, it's an appointment. For certain positions, it's an election. If you're interested in becoming a judge, look into the different opportunities and then see which would work best for you. And then the ones that get appointed could be having done work either with the DA or with the prosecutor's office. So there are many different ways of becoming involved in politics to get onto the bench.
Thank you. Some of our viewers are curious about your clerks. Do you hire clerks? And what do you look for in a law clerk?
Yeah, so I am very lucky. I have a young woman who is my law clerk. She came at like the first year, towards the end of the first year that I was on the bench. And so I wasn't looking for a very long time. I found one, and she came recommended to me by a different judge who interviewed her and said, Ruchie, she's a perfect fit for you. So basically you have to be an attorney to be a law clerk. And sometimes we find out from our colleagues, someone that could be qualified, or you just advertise yourself when you're looking, and then whatever your qualifications are is what you look for. But you want someone who writes well. And being a law clerk means you need to really know what your judge needs and just prepare the judge, because if I wouldn't have my amazing law clerk, her name is Aviva Love, if I wouldn't have her, I wouldn't be able to keep it all together, because you're running to this courtroom where you're running here, where you have motions, and you have cases, and the law clerk is really the one who keeps you organized. So that is another way as well to go and become a judge, because my uncle, he had been a law clerk, and that's how he became a judge. So that could also be a pathway for some people to become a judge.
That's terrific. And I think your story about the interview also proves your point that you never know. You can interview with one judge and someone else hears about you and they decide to hire you.
Right.
I think we have time for one more question. And a number of our viewers are very curious. If you could say just a bit more, I know you can't comment on any particular cases, but is there anything about your religious tradition that you think makes a difference in the day-to-day work of judging?
So I'll give you an example of what it was like in my first 2 years on the bench doing arraignments in Brooklyn Criminal Court. And this is pre-COVID, when the courthouse was busy, when the police were coming in, people being arrested continuously, and I was doing arraignments. I had the night shift till 1 o'clock in the morning. And most of the young defendants coming in were from like the inner city, the slum neighborhoods, the very poor neighborhoods. They were recidivists. Their rap sheet could be like a textbook. They could have been 16 years old and arrested for so many times again and again and again. And for me, it was like a real eye opener for me to see this. And I had counseled Hasidic kids at risk. And when I looked at these young defendants, I saw the same pain in their eyes that I saw in the pain in the eyes of the young Hasidic boys that I would counsel. And in a matter of like, it didn't even take a long time at all for me to suddenly zero in that these young defendants are going through a very similar trauma, different circumstances, but it's trauma. They're like, when I was counseling the boys, I would say they're not bad boys, they're making bad choices because they've been through trauma. And suddenly I found myself talking to these young defendants and telling them, you have to believe in yourself. You have to make a change. You can't control your past, but you could control your future. And all the concepts of tshuva and belief, all those are like in the back of my mind. And here I am doing arraignments, telling them, and then I would have these young men cry. They would say, Your Honor, no one ever spoke to us like that before. And then the prosecutor would say, hey, what, Your Honor, what about the victim? What about those injuries? You know, we have photos. I'm sure you don't want to see those pictures. And I would say, I'm a paramedic. I want to see those photos. Let me see those injuries. So, you know, there's an expression in Yiddish, was man tit fayener, tit men far sich. When you do a mitzvah and help somebody else, you're going to find out one day you actually helped yourself. So my 2 mitzvah projects, my Kids at Risk and my EMS project, is what helped me during those first 2 years on the criminal court bench, which was very challenging for a Hasidic woman. But all those values is what kept me grounded and helped me sit here while I was listening to these horrible cases and horrible crimes. And we're talking about Brooklyn Criminal Court. You had murder cases, you had rape, and then I would look at these people and I would say, look at me. Look at where you are today. How did you get here? And I felt that you have such opportunities to really impact people's lives in a positive way when you have the education that we have from our community.
Thank you. Well, speaking for myself as a former prosecutor in Brooklyn and as a professor of criminal law, and speaking for my students for the law school and for all of the audience, and for the Jewish Law Institute, we find that very inspiring.
Thank you all for making Touro and for Touro being there for me when I was ready to go to college. I couldn't have achieved what I did. And I thank Hashem and I thank Touro, and continue chazak, continue doing your amazing job.
Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.